Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the General Show. I am back with another episode. I hope you enjoy this one. So, today we'll be looking at two interesting things: inflation and then comparative costs for people. Remember, we're on a financial journey, so every single step that we take is towards self-enrichment, self-investment, so that we make more educated guesses financially and we're able to build rapport financially with discipline and persistence. You see, so let us go. I'm going to try my best to simplify what inflation is first. I hope you understand and you engage by liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, starring. I don't know, man, just do what has to be done, but please do enjoy. So let's get to it. What is inflation? One of the earliest and fondest memories is buying a Rolo ice cream with my dad at the local Spar, which was $4.50 at the time. It was a bargain. Little did I know, Today, the same Rolo costs north of 20 Rand. That, my friends, is inflation. It's when prices go up over time. So this is a insert from someone I found who wrote this thread, and then I thought I'd share it and then we discuss it. So this is literally plain and simple, a very practical example of what inflation is and what it does to our money over time. We all need to know what inflation is so that we can future project what we should spend our money on wisely. See? Then moving on, he asks, so how does it happen? Inflation can be caused by two things: supply and demand. Please note that supply and demand aren't the only factors when factoring in inflation, but then they are two of the simplest things which you can refer your inflation to. You see, for instance, COVID within itself became an extra additive factor to inflation, also along with supply and demand. So it was literally a pandemic, then supply and demand, you see. So it's not the only precursor, but it is one of the precursors, you see. So supply, it implies that it increases the input prices of raw materials of goods. If it costs more to make, the end product will be more expensive. For example, more expensive raw materials, the wages or shortages due to war. As I pointed out, it could be war. For instance, we're in an economic war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a proxy war between the West, NATO primarily, the G7 group, and also Russia or the BRICS coalition. So that is the main hassle, you see. So they influence your supply and demand, also known as inflation. Hence, it's very imperative that we know about this inflation. For instance, it's said that this Cold War between Russia and Ukraine will impact the markets for the next 44 months, because I found out about this 4 months ago. So it was supposed to be 48 months. So you see, within that duration, one needs to be careful of where and how they attend things. You see, that's why it's important to know. Then it goes on to say demand. It's caused by a high demand for the same amount of units available. It can be caused by a variety of factors, such as your increased spend by consumers, the firms which do the logistics and distribution, government, which is the one that sets the regulations, taxes the said business, which does the business with the people, and also foreigners, which means more imports. You see? So let's say now for the Rolo ice cream, foreign ice cream came of the same taste quality, but it was cheaper. Then it's going to force the demand to either go up or go down, depending on what the consumers see. You see, also government would also have to penalize local businesses as differently from those of foreign business, but it's one of those factors. As I had mentioned, inflation is not only supply and demand, but they are good points of references for inflation and a person to understand them simply. And I'm sure you can use anything, the price of a pen 20 years ago and now, the price of a book, the price of a t-shirt, all of these things, they are all impacted by inflation, you see. But remember, we generally invest in the seventh wonder of the world, which is compound interest assets. And we're on this journey, and I'm hoping that in my next episode, I will be able to discuss 6 months of how the gold and silver or precious metals have performed throughout. It's a very interesting one, and we'll unpack it on the next episode. But then for now, this is what we're going to look at. It's a very good explanation between what supply is, what demand is, and what inflation is. It's very cutthroat, straight to the point, and simple for the most youngest of person to understand, which is very good. We need more of this. And then so I go on. What is it a problem, or why is it a problem? Inflation makes your money and assets worth less. Obviously that's a very big red flag. If there are things that make my money worth less and less over time, then that is a very big indicator that you need to do something better. So it goes on to say, imagine leaving 100 Rand under your mattress today. In 20 and 30 years, it will be worth about the same as a 5 Rand coin. So that is the impact of inflation. So now, if we are met with such a conundrum, it's up to us now. When you take that 100 Rand, you put it under the mattress, how do you water it and grow it so that in a few years' time, it is not worth that 5 Rand coin? Because that's such a huge depreciation. That's about 95% decrease. I wouldn't say the estimation is wrong, because we don't know what the future holds, because they're trying to move away from fiat currency. They're trying to do crypto. They're trying to do controlled currencies and so forth. They're trying to do a lot of things. So we just need to be cognizant of the happenings. But this is a clear indicator, again, of what inflation is in simple terms. And I hope everyone at this current juncture understands why we are putting in so much effort into understanding what inflation is, because we don't need to put our money under a mattress. It's both illegal and not the wisest of decisions, because money is not like a plant. It doesn't just grow. It needs to be used so that it multiplies at the adequate rates that it should. So I hope that's very helpful for everyone, and by now we are more cognizant of things. So that was a very good example of inflation over the years. Then it goes on to say, it's important to understand the difference between nominal and real growth. So he goes on, he's introduced two extra financial terminologies, nominal growth and real growth. So these two terms will be broken down. Firstly, we're going to deal with real growth. Real growth is an adjustment for inflation. For instance, if your salary increased by 8%, but the inflation is 6%, your income only increased by 2% in real terms. You see, this is the information that we all need to know, because I've seen many people when they go to strike and then they say, okay, no, our salaries increased by 10%, 1 to 15% increase, whatnot, but then they're not checking the inflation rates. I think currently South Africa's inflation is just above 10%. So if you are fighting for 15% interest rate hike for your salary, it means you are just going to get a 5% increase when you factor in both things. So that's one thing that we need to be cognizant of. And I'm glad this example was put forth because it's so simple, straightforward, and it gets straight to you, you see. So yeah, that was a very interesting one. I'm glad I was able to see this thread, and the person shared it freely for all of us to share and discuss. It's very good. I love it for it, and I hope we will engage even more on it. So let's continue. The next thing is, why is it a good thing? I presume they mean the real growth instead of the nominal growth. A little bit of inflation can be real good. It encourages people to spend money instead of saving it. Spending helps the economy grow and creates jobs for people. This is an actually true and reflective statement. As simple as it sounds, it's actually the truth. Because what ends up happening is people who start making money hoard their money, right? Meaning that they put it under mattresses and. And remember, for a group of people to succeed, they need to exchange their monies with each other through goods and services or out of free will. So if I'm hoarding, let's say there are only 100 printed banknotes and I'm hoarding about 60 something, it means that there's an estimated 30 something in circulation, which is small. But because of this inflation, I am now forced to take out my banknotes from the mattress, and then I'm able to circulate it amongst the people, which is actually very good and such a reflective but practical example of an explanation. It's quite concise. I'm very glad he shared it in this manner. It's very good, and I'm very appreciative of this explanation once again. So we do need to stimulate the economy, and we do need to exchange money as much as possible, and also we need to increase our salaries, because people, it's 2023, we are from a pandemic, we're still recovering even from the pandemic, and as much as people don't talk about it, we are still recovering from it. So let's stimulate the economy. And then he goes on, how do you calculate inflation? So we use a measure called the customer price index. So he introduces another terminology for the next person. I hope you're listening and taking notes, because this is very informative and quite educational. I don't think they teach this at school in such a practical manner. So this is quite a gem of information, right? So it goes on to say that a CPI, or Consumer Price Index, looks at the prices of the baskets of goods and services that the average household buys. This basket includes things like food, clothes, healthcare, transportation, and education. So that's how you calculate your Consumer Price Index. Remember, I mentioned a couple of episodes ago, we're doing the 7 most expensive bank accounts in South Africa, and we're busy looking at how much they cost, what exactly they're offering us. So essentially we're doing a CPI because we're checking, are the benefits worth paying that much for the bank charges and. So CPI, these are just different parameters. So for instance, as a person, now I need to look at my food. So let's say my grocery used to be 500, but then now it's 700. So I'd say 700, my clothes used to be 300 and now 400. So now 700 plus 400 plus. So it's a comparison of what a regular person would spend. You do your own CPI for yourself to see how much inflation is impacting you, or you do the one where economists have already done the work for you. Although it's not necessarily truly reflective for yourself, hence it's more advisable to do it by yourself. So here we go. The inflation rate is the difference in CPI values from one period to another. So for instance, the CPI of last year in 2022 was 100. Then the CPI of 2023 was 106.3. The difference is 6.3%. So that's how they got to the inflation of this said period. I'm very glad that this thing is so self-explanatory. One doesn't need to delve too much into it, but we are simplifying hard terminology and making it easy using very practical examples. So the difference is 6.3%, which means that inflation increased by 6.3% from 2022 to 2023. I hope that makes sense for everyone, and such a lovely example. But at this current juncture, that's what's happening to the South African economy, and unfortunately such a drastic inflation rate will impact how a person repays their debt, how they get extra debt to try and salvage or create a stable household. So this is the conundrum that we are facing. So we need stimulus from the economy to help us and boost our financial standings so that this 6.3% doesn't impact us as much as it should have. And if so, government can help and alleviate the prices of the things that we get so that we're in a better standing for the next cycle of inflation. Because as I said, it was projected that because of this proxy war, we are still going to suffer for the next 44 months because COVID has had its wave, and on top of that, we took an economical proxy war and put it in the mix. Thank you very much for understanding. So here, what I have is I was busy discussing with one of my friends, and we were comparing between renting and owning. So he was arguing that owning is the way to go. And I was like, oh, interesting, it is. Ideally, that is the case. But for me, as a person currently, I can't afford it. And my pros of renting are way better. Then we sat down. Fortunately, we were able to find a mock example of what we are talking about. And then we going to suss it out. So as you can see, the expensive mortgage for renting is 1.5, owning is 1.3. There, renting loses because it costs more. Insurance is less because I'm just renting, but for owning, it has to be more. Property tax is 0 because it's not my property. Then, for a person who owns, will pay property tax. And remember, these numbers will fluctuate depending on what the repo rate says for the year or for the quarter, since that's how they like to navigate things these days. And then utilities, maybe my utilities are 150 for other people to do it on my behalf, or the owner doing it on my behalf as a mandatory requirement. But then for the owner, it's even double that because it's your house. You have to keep that standard. Then the next one is landscaping. We don't do any landscaping. It is not our responsibility. Then as a landowner, it is your responsibility, and it's going to cost you 120. So repairs and maintenance usually are covered by a contractual law that the repairs and maintenance are the owner's responsibility. So generally, you're not tasked with looking after that. And then for maintenance of an owner, it's quite a lot, because what if your child now dents the paint, or your dog pooped there and then now you must replace, or you was chewing the gate guard or whatever, something has to happen in the house. It generally usually does, and then you have to make a plan and repair. So for me, in this current juncture, because of the turmoil and fidgetiness of the markets, renting is more reasonable until we figure out our finances for the good, and then that would mean a lot, you see. But for now, this comparison is quite factual for me and applicable for me. So yeah, then it goes on to say that, remember, I once did a video, I think it was a couple of months ago, of the 50-30-20 budget, because we're starting to understand different terminology financially. So 50, so they're using 100 as a percentile for you to measure how much you must spend of your money and on what exactly. So the 50% you need to spend on your needs. Presume now you're working and you're a household person, you're adulting in the full context. You need to pay 50% of it as combined. I want to mention the things. It needs to go into your housing, it needs to go into utilities like your electricity, your water, it needs to go into insurance. You need home insurance because, hey man, we live in a cold world. Groceries, which are a nightmare in this day and age because everything costs an arm and a leg. Healthcare, because you never know what will happen, and also you need quarterly or biannual, half year, you need to go check your teeth, and you need to get your immunizations and so forth. But you do need healthcare, it's very important. Transportation, remember, gets you from point A to point B, very critical. And then you need personal care. Personal care is for your needs. Then the 30% goes into your wants, which should be amusement, going to the movies. You need to go shopping for yourself, for leisure. You need to reward yourself for all this hard work. Dining out, create a good atmosphere for yourself and your family. And then subscriptions. We live in a subscription-based world. Your Netflixes, your Apple Music, your Spotify, and so forth. Then the 20%, so one which most people fail with, is the savings. You need to put your money away in retirement, invest it in precious metals as advised, have an emergency fund, you pay off your debt, because remember, sometimes you can't finance your standard of living, so you start acquiring debt in hopes that you will be able to micromanage everything, which hopefully all of us are able to do so. And then the other one is emergencies, as I mentioned. Emergency money, and then emergency for anything, you see. Then we had another discussion also. Someone said, I'm a petrol head, by the way. Like, I love cars, but not in like the conventional way of saying this one is faster or that. No, but then like just opening up a car, fixing it, revamping it again, rebuilding it, the wiring, the engineering of it, and then also the painting of it. I'm a big fan of it because when I was growing up, I was surrounded by people who actually love fixing cars, you see. So yeah, it sort of grew into me. So here's the example. Jack in 2016 put 2,000 down on a brand new car, and he financed it for 26,600 for 72 months, and he repays it monthly for 55499. Then there's Jill. 2015, she bought a used car for $2,000 and invested $554 per month. And then in today's instance, now it's futuristic, Jack has paid off his car with $10,500, where Jill, on the other hand, has an investment worth $52764.92. Okay, this is a bit dreamy. I understand what they're trying to comparatively show us, but then remember, a car, if it is taking you to your job, isn't a loss. It's a very important asset because it helps with your personal growth and development, you see. And then for Jill, yes, they're saying she put 2,000 down on a car and then she's going to invest the rest, but then the car breaks down, it wants an engine rebuild. Who's going to pay for that, and so forth? And so I'm saying this is a bit futuristic in as much as we are hoping it does what they're hoping to do, shock factor. It doesn't really translate. And then here's another interesting one. So they're saying investing your first $1,000. Okay. Realistically, for most people, this is a lot of money which maybe they can't raise, like for many people. So ideally, I'd say $100, you see. And then if you like 1,000 rand or 100 rand, you see, because small consistent steps build up to something very big. So let us start educating yourself. You buy and read these books, right? So presumably they think if you're investing in yourself first, use $1,000 or rands. You need to educate yourself by buying books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I say it's bogus. It's not very practical, and it's from an ignorant standpoint. And then the next one is Intelligent Investor, Think and Grow Rich. I've read it. It's interesting. The Compound Effect, I haven't read it. The Millionaire Next Door, I also haven't read it. In the little book. Then the $800 you'd invest in index funds and ETFs. So you consider making your first investment into ETFs. And so for me, I just say, guys, put this into precious metal. Let's say $400 into precious metals, and then the other 400 can still figure out index funds and ETFs. Because the thing is, with ETFs and index funds, you need to now study markets, this and that and that and that. Precious metals, it's simple. It's either I'm silver or I'm gold. I buy, I put it away, wait a certain period of time, I'm able to sell it off and I get what I've gotten. Simple. Whereas for shares, and not everyone is that investment savvy. Yes, we all want to get there and have a high level of proficiency, but realistically speaking, we don't have a time because we're in a very big rat race and you need to work smart, not necessarily hard, you see. But yeah, it's a very interesting comparison. I hope you enjoyed the 3-part or 4-part. It's a very long episode, but I hope it's worth every single minute. Please like, comment, share, subscribe.